Hey there YouTube lovers, my name is BB8 and today I am going to share my concept for a Nintendo Switch 2. I know I have already done multiple concepts for a Switch successor in the past with the Switch Air in 2020 and the Switch Pro also in 2020. But this is probably the last time I am going to talk about a Switch successor on the channel, but hopefully I can go more into detail with this concept compared to the others. Now let's get into it, shall we? To start off the video, we have the specs and the price point. So for the specs, for the Nintendo Switch 2 base model, the system would be 4.5 inches high, unlike the 4 inches the original had, and 10 inches wide, unlike the original's 9.5. And the screen would be 7.3 inch OLED, with not 720 but 1080p this time around, with it being 3 inches bigger than the OLED model screen, with the battery life being 6 to 12, and the internal storage would be 128 gigabytes, and it wouldn't be able to hold one, but it would be able to hold 2 micro SD cards with Bluetooth 5.0 without a transmitter this time around, at the price point of $379. And for the Lite model, it would be 3.9 inches high, unlike the original Lite's 3.6, and 8.5 inches long, unlike the original Switch Lite's 8.2, and a 6-inch OLED 1080 screen, unlike the 5.5 the original had. And the battery life for the Lite model would be 5 to 9. And this system would also have 128 gigabytes with 2 micro SD card slots and Bluetooth 5.0 along with that as well, at a price point of $229. For the dock, the size I went for is 110 by 179 by 60 millimeters. For the connectors, we have 2 USB 3.0 compatible ports on the side and 2 on the back, with a system connector, AC adapter port, HDMI port, LAN port, and this dock for the new to the Switch 2 would add 1440p and 4K as options for resolutions. And the dock would have a built-in fan to it as well, so you want to play Breath of the Wild in 4K without overheating your Switch, there you go. So in the box, I know this might sound like the stupidest placing to put this, but in the box would include the console being the color you have chose, and I do think they could offer more colors for the Switch this time around, because the shell on the console itself is just black. So I do think to add a bit more color variety, similar to the Mario edition they released in 2021, why not bring out multicolored switches? Because then, like with the DS, we could have more color variety for the Switch, and it would also include the dock Series 2 that might sound like the dumbest name in the world for a dock, but that's just the way I've named it, as well as the Joy-Con Series 2 left and right. I will get to the Joy-Con Series 2 in a second, and for the wrist straps, matching the colour of the console as well as the grip, and including the HDMI cable and AC adapter. And the light model would just include the console and the AC adapter. So for the Joy-Con Series 2, the size would end up being 105 by 40.9.31.4, with the weight being the same as the original. The buttons on the left would have the pressable left stick, with the analog stick being different this time around. Directional L and ZL, but the ZL and ZR buttons are analog this time, not digital, as well as SL and SR, with the buttons the capture button, the release button, and the sync button. And of course, on the R, would have the right stick, as I just said, not the same analog sticks this time around, and the only difference with the right is the home button, but with the connectivity this time around, this would be Bluetooth 5.0, not 3.0, and would end up including some of the features that the originals did, but the only difference with the vibration function this time around is it would be called Enhanced Rumble, not HD Rumble, probably being halfway between the PS5's haptic feedback and the original Switch's HD Rumble. The internal battery, of course, would be an Li-ion battery, which cannot be removed, but the battery life for the Joy-Cons would be upgraded to 25, not 20. And the charging time would end up being 2.5, being the original's 3.5, which means that if you were to charge them, you cannot connect them to the original or OLED models to charge. These have to be connected to the Switch 2 in order to charge, or the Joy-Con Grip Series 2. And new for the Switch 2, the front-facing 1080p camera for augmented reality. I do think bringing AR technology back would be a fun idea, but I am wonder how they are going to tackle AR gaming on a modern day handheld, but the back-facing camera would probably be on the tablet, not the Joy-Cons. And for the design, the buttons and analog sticks would end up being the same colour as the Joy-Cons themselves, but the Joy-Con Series 2 would end up keeping the matte texture from the original Joy-Cons on the front, but having a rubberized grip on the back, of course, with the matte plastic underneath keeping it in place. And for the user interface, I know I have ranted about the user interface of the original Switch a lot in the past, but this is probably the last time I'm going to rant about the Switch's UI. So the Nintendo Switch 2 could either use the same UI as it did last time, similar to how the Xbox Series X used the same UI as the Xbox One, or it could have an entirely new UI which allows you to bring your data, screenshots, eShop data, and Pokemon over to the Nintendo Switch 2. And for you guys who might have noticed the Switch 2 logo on an an icon on the home screen. That's because Optimised for Switch 2 would end up being a new feature of the system. So it would end up being backwards compatible with all Switch games except the Nintendo Labo series, but only a selected few from the original Switch would end up being optimized for the Switch 2. And the way you would be able to tell if a game is optimized is being able to look at the icon on the home screen with the Switch 2 logo on it. And the optimized Switch games could include graphical upgrades and 60 FPS in both handheld mode and docked mode, and titles that originally released on Switch 2 would end up being optimized as well. I just think, in my opinion, doing this would be a bit easier than just re-releasing the game. I think similar to how they had to re-release Wii U games for the Switch one by one, I do think instead of re-releasing Switch games with enhanced graphics, that they could end up doing this. Similar to what the Xbox Series X did, I do think optimizing games could end up being the way. But I do think the games that would end up being optimized are both Breath of the Wild's, Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition 2 and 3, Smash Ultimate, and a few more down the line. And for the games, like I just said, the Switch 2 would be backwards compatible with all Switch titles except for Labo. But for the first 2 to 3 years of its life cycle, that I would end up sharing cartridges with the original Switch. But with the Switch 2 receiving optimized versions, but after the 2 to 3 years, the Switch 2 cartridges would only be compatible with the Switch 2, and the games from the original Switch and Switch 2 games that released within the 2 to 3 years would still be compatible, would be compatible with the original Switch, but games that the original Switch could not handle and the Switch 2 can, won't be compatible with the original Switch at all. And finally, to end the video, we have the release date. This is probably just a guess here, but I am guessing that this would end up either releasing in spring of 2024 or the holiday of 2024, with, for the first time probably in Nintendo history, with two models launching together. But a Pro model coming further down the line, probably in 2026. So guys, what did you think of my Nintendo Switch 2 concept video? Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and turn your notification bell on so you don't miss another video like this one in the future. I do have an idea for a potential handheld that PlayStation could bring out. Like, I know the Vita flopped in that, but I am going to make it into a video at some point. So I'll see you all in a future video. BB8 out.